West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, today, Donald Trump met his Judge Sirica, and he met him in Brooklyn. And that could mean that Donald Trump is now on a legal fast track to a very, very bad outcome to the FBI's search of his Florida residence, where the FBI found hundreds of government documents and classified documents, including some highly classified documents that the FBI found in Donald Trump's desk. In his desk. Judge John Sirica was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1974 because of his handling of criminal cases involving Republican President Richard Nixon. It was Judge John Sirica who ordered President Nixon to hand over the audio tapes of the president's discussions in the Oval Office. Those tapes revealed Richard Nixon's involvement in federal crimes. Richard Nixon then resigned the presidency and a month later was pardoned by his chosen vice president, who had become President Gerald Ford. That pardon saved Richard Nixon from becoming the first former president of the United States to be charged with a crime. And tonight, that historical achievement of being the first former president of the United States to be charged with a crime seems ever more likely to become an entry in Donald Trump's resume. Judge John Sirica was appointed to the federal bench by Republican President Dwight Eisenhower, and he took down the next Republican President, Richard Nixon. Donald Trump's John Sirica was also appointed by a Republican president, Ronald Reagan. Judge Raymond Dearie, who is now serving as the special master in the case of Donald J. Trump versus United States of America, became the special master in the case because Donald Trump's own lawyers suggested his name to the judge handling the case in Florida, asking her to appoint Raymond Dearie as special master. And because Judge Dearie has always been widely regarded as a fair-minded, reasonable, and honorable jurist, the federal prosecutors in the case simply agreed to Donald Trump's choice of Judge Dearie, who serves in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. And so it was in the federal courthouse in Brooklyn today where Donald Trump, who was born in the adjacent neighborhood of Queens, was told something that Donald Trump's parents never told him. You can't have your cake and eat it too. That's actually something parents have been telling children for literally hundreds of years, beginning in medieval England, where versions of that sentence were passed around in the 1500s. In 1611, the English poet John Davies put it in a way that actually makes more semantic sense than the current version when he said, "A man cannot eat his cake and have it still." Judge Dearie conducted a meeting with the lawyers of both sides of the case in his Brooklyn courtroom today, and tonight Donald Trump is probably throwing his cake. Judge Dearie scheduled the meeting for 2 p.m. and remarkably entered his courtroom precisely at 2 p.m., according to our first guest tonight, Andrew Weissman, who was in the room. That kind of precise adherence to schedule to anyone who has spent much time in courtrooms is remarkable. It's just a remarkable way to start a 2 p.m. court session, exactly at 2 p.m. Judge Dearie was quick, he was simple, he was direct. His first question was to the Trump lawyers, quote, "Is there a real dispute about the property inventory?" Donald Trump's lead lawyer today, former federal prosecutor James Trusty, spoke in response to that question for a couple of hundred words, but didn't answer it, to which Judge Dearie said, "So the answer to my question is, you don't know whether there is going to be a real dispute to the inventory." Mr. Trusty, that's fair. Judge Dearie covered some mechanical details about how most of the 11,000 documents in the case can be made available to Donald Trump's lawyers. Then Judge Dearie turned to the most important documents, saying, quote, "The government, of course, wants the classified documents off the table for the moment, at least. I understand that. We're dealing with presumably highly sensitive information. If I'm going to verify the classification, what am I looking at? Is there a claim that the document is classified that should not have been classified? Is there a claim that something was labeled purposefully classified that isn't? The reason I ask is, if the government essentially gives me prima facie evidence that these are classified documents, and you, the Trump lawyers, for whatever reason, decide not to advance any claims of declassification, which I understand is your prerogative, I'm left with a prima facie case of classified documents. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. Donald Trump's lawyers didn't think that was the end of it. They said, we're not in the position, without having seen the physical evidence and without having a chance to fully explore what these documents purport to be, to tell the court in good faith that I know I have an argument to be made about classification. To which the judge said, well, you did bring the lawsuit and make that claim. Now, in Judge Aileen Mercedes Cannon's courtroom in Florida, Trump's lawyers could get away with making statements like that. But not today. Not in Brooklyn. Not with Judge Dearie. Judge Dearie suggested the clear possibility that the Trump lawyers would not be allowed to see the classified documents in this case, and that Judge Dearie himself might not even look at them. Judge Dearie said, let's not belittle the fact that we are dealing with at least potentially legitimately classified information. The government has a very strong obligation, as all of us do, to see to it that that information doesn't get in the wrong hands. It's not just a matter, it seems to me, of being cleared. It's a matter of need to know. And if you need to know, you will know. That's the way I see it. If I can make my judgments without, I don't want to see the material. It's presumably sensitive material. If I can make my recommendation to Judge Cannon, right or wrong, without exposing myself or you to that material, I will do it. Before the meeting with Judge Dearie at 2 p.m. today, the Trump lawyers filed their response to the Justice Department's appeal of the case, seeking to exclude the classified documents from the special master process. The Trump lawyers, once again, classified the case as, quote, a document storage dispute that has spiraled out of control, and said, quote, the government wrongfully seeks to criminalize the possession by the 45th president of his own presidential and personal records. The problem for the Trump lawyers is that possession is a crime. Possession of these records is a crime. It is legally true that former presidents have access to many of the records that were found in Donald Trump's home. Access, but presidents are not legally allowed to take them home and own them. The Trump lawyers repeatedly played the classification game in their filing, the appeals filing to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, referring to, quote, the government's contention that the approximately 100 purportedly classified documents were in fact classified. But the Trump lawyers refused to say, again, that the documents were not classified. And Donald Trump's lawyers, in writing, went so far as to invite a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump to determine whether the documents are classified and whether or not they belong to Donald Trump. The Trump lawyers actually said in writing whether some of the listed property does not, in fact, belong to President Trump is a matter best dealt with on summary judgment or at trial. Or at trial. There are Donald Trump's lawyers in writing today to a federal appeals court saying the way to determine who should have these documents is to charge Donald Trump with federal crimes and put him on trial. After a day of Trump lawyering like today, you don't have to be a TV fiction drama writer like I used to be left wondering if Donald Trump's lawyers secretly were working against him, wanting him to be convicted of crimes. Would they have done or said anything different today? I mean, think about it. It was Donald Trump's lawyers who suggested Raymond Dearie as the special master who said today that he might not even look at the classified documents before ruling in favor of the prosecution. And it is Donald Trump's lawyers who have told the special master and the appeals court that the way to find out if Donald Trump is going to claim that he declassified those documents while he was president is to charge him with a crime. They are inviting federal prosecutors to charge him with a crime. The highest priced lawyer in the room today, the one Donald Trump is paying $3 million of his contributors' money, didn't say a word, not one word. And he's considered the most competent lawyer on the Trump side. At what point does Donald Trump begin to wonder which side are his lawyers really on?
It is Wednesday, the 21st of September of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? No one. Boy, they seem to be taking over, too. Not just the priests, but all those weird, heretical, evangelical Protestant ministers. Some of them, I don't know, are they Protestant? I can't quite figure out what denomination Q is, for instance. I guess they're heretics. Those who say that the Pope is the heretic are heretics. You don't have to be a Catholic to accept that, the hierarchy of a particular religious belief is what it is. Okay? For how many thousands of years? A couple of thousand, we'll say. The Pope has been the embodiment of God on earth. Until this one. Yikes. Okay, even when we had the Nazi popes, we couldn't question them. Okay? But now, it's okay. Because how religious are these people? How spiritual are they? When everything that motivates them is crass politics, human weakness. And then they say that they are the arbiters of good taste. They are the arbiters of right and wrong. And that's how women get burned at the stake as witches. That's how they get hung in the public square as witches. That is how they are weighted down with several heavy stones and thrown in the middle of the lake because they are witches. All right. Many questions. I have so many questions. One question that I have is, how is Mike Flynn? How is he able to walk around free? The nuclear reactor deal that he was negotiating, it looks like Russia is going to be manufacturing them. How is that possible with this guy running around free? Well, we know how it's possible. He's running around free. Why is he not stripped of his pension? Why is he not stripped of his generalship? Why is he not thrown in the brig? The same reason Trump gets to have his hate rallies? Is that what it is? I'll say this one more time. Al Franken got drummed out of politics because of a USO tour he was on decades before he became a senator. And because of a weird joke that they did on stage all the time, suddenly becomes so untoward we have to get rid of him. Right after he had interrogated during a Senate hearing some Trump personages. And we said, yeah, we can't have that in our party. But Trump, Mike Flynn, Bannon, etc., are walking around free, continuing the insurrection to turn over and overthrow the United States of America. And there's no law that prevents them from doing that. I don't know. I remember during Bushco, a group of Quakers who were protesting the war were arrested. They were all bumping 80. Conspiracy against the United States of America. Quakers. It's not like they were calling for the violent overthrow. No, they were protesting a war. And they were planning a protest and a march. You know, talking about taking over any state capitol building, capitals, let alone the U.S. Capitol. How many times did that happen in the summer leading up to January 6th? Happened in this state of Oregon, happened in Michigan, etc., etc., etc. They wanted to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Hang her. They wanted to hang her. And now the defense says, well, yeah, but the FBI had infiltrated this group and busted them while they're planning that, so that has to have been entrapment. I don't know. Isn't that what a cop does? I guess. Why is that untoward now? Didn't stop anybody from, giving Fred Hampton a break. Oh, we'll just break into his house in the middle of the night and shoot him dead. God, you'd think he was Breonna Taylor. Which reminds me, I just came across another little headline. A judge there is going to continue prosecuting protesters that were protesting Breonna Taylor, I guess because, well, they're black and they didn't have a permit. I don't know. Whereas the January 6th insurrection is, they're being treated so horribly. Anybody's never been treated as horribly as these patriots. They're not patriots, they're traitors. Got into it a little bit on Nextdoor here in Southern Oregon. Boy, what a cesspool. I know I shouldn't be taking part in it, but every now and then it's, dip your foot in the cesspool and see if the acid burns your toe off. Yeah, people are very, very upset. Somebody had put up there that they were trying to get a group of people together so that they could take in refugees from Ukraine, South America, et cetera, and that what DeSantis and Abbott were doing was, abjectly wrong. And, of course, that person was dumped on as being some sort of Democratic baby eater, blood-drinking commie. Right? And that there's no way that the Democrats had 86 million people vote. How is that possible? From the previous election, they only had X amount, and then all of a sudden they have 86 million. Well, maybe Donald Trump had something to do with that, pal. Maybe people got pissed off. Think about that. Yeah, they cheat, they lie, and they think everybody does it too. So if we won the election, it must have been illegal. Must have been. So, of course, you got the some of my best friends are black. Some of my family members are of a different race. Oh, yeah. You see, I'm holding them up. Look, I got a token minority in my family. So who's the bigot now, liberal, commie, blood-drinking baby eater? So simply pushing back and saying, wow, what do you expect from Southern Oregon, sundown town, bigoted racists? Oh, did I get yelled at? Never before has any of this hate. We've never experienced this level of hate. These liberals are just haters. After we got idiots saying, I'm not a racist. I just don't want all these illegals coming here and replacing us. I'm not a racist. And then they start talking about replacement theory. And everybody is an illegal. You try to point out certain parts of the fallacy of their argument. And, of course, you're just a baby-eating, blood-drinking Democratic commie. Just don't call them racist. Don't. You will be banned. Yeah, I started getting the notifications that you can keep this conversation from going off the rails. Oh, really? Me? It's up to me? How about telling the idiots that say they're not racist, but the first thing they do is call people illegals and they don't want to be replaced by them? Okay? It's all right. We know what's going on. And we also know that we have a curated show for you, and so we might as well let you know what is on the rest of the menu, since we had Lawrence at the top explaining how Trump is finally facing a judge who is not playing games. Let's hope that that's the case. Though in a sad footnote to Judge Cannon's order for the special master, she can let him go for any reason at all, like getting too close to the truth. Yeah, it's not about whether he's taking too long. It's when Donald Trump says, you got to fire this guy and get me somebody else. All right, we'll see how that goes, because that's coming up. And I have no idea what the 11th Circuit will do, because the DOJ is already preparing an appeal to the Supreme Court. Yeah, that might just be prudent anyway, have your ducks all in a row. But it is a wonder that there's a missing judge on that appellate court position that still needs to be confirmed. So there's 11 judges there. And of those 11, 6 are Trump appointees. How is that possible in 4 years? How is that possible? Try bringing that BS up to a maggot, and they have no idea how government works. Absolutely none. Which is another aside, too. They are of the firm belief that it's not Donald Trump that controlled the National Guard on January 6th. That would be the D.C. mayor and Pelosi. And Trump even asked, well, don't you need or want the National Guard there? And apparently, according to the maggots, Pelosi and Bowser said, no, we don't need them. Don't. Which is the exact opposite of what we know from the hearings. And I mentioned that too. If you follow the January 6 hearings and the DOJ investigations and their filings, you might learn a little bit about American civics. Because obviously you don't know the succession of power, and that the President of the United States controls the National Guard in D.C., because there is no mayor in D.C. Oh, I'm sorry. There's no governor in D.C. So therefore, the President of the United States calls out the National Guard. And why was the National Guard not called out? Well, there could have been a couple of reasons. Maybe Pelosi feared that the National Guard would be used by Donald Trump to finish the job. Maybe that could be it. But we know what the truth is. And the truth is that Donald Trump was enjoying what he was seeing on the TV. And he wasn't about to get anybody to go in there to save the legislative branch of the United States. They are the enemy. And his army was there to take over. All right. On the rest of the menu, U.S. authorities charged 48 people in Minnesota in the largest pandemic-related fraud scheme yet, stealing $250 million from a federal program that provides meals to low-income children. The California Attorney General stripped control from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department of a controversial criminal investigation into County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. And FEMA tells a skeptical Puerto Rico that this time won't be like Hurricane Maria. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Myanmar's military-ruled government denied reports it carried out an air attack on a school that killed at least 7 children. And Iran faced global criticism and massive internal protests over a woman's death by the notorious morality police. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the page there, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, because we need help paying our bills, to be perfectly honest. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, it really does help us pay those bills. So please do. And thank you for your generosity of those who already have. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do that by going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of the Twitter feed. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, so you can find those show notes and links by following my Twitter feed, and you'll have other entertaining aspects as well. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Alrighty, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is out of the Associated Press by Amy Forlidi. United States authorities charged 48 people in Minnesota with conspiracy and other counts in what they said was the largest pandemic-related fraud scheme yet, stealing $250 million from a federal program that provides meals to low-income children. Federal prosecutors say the defendants created companies that claim to be offering food to tens of thousands of children across Minnesota, then sought reimbursement for those meals through the U.S. Department of Agriculture's food nutrition programs. Prosecutors say few meals were actually served, and the defendants used the money to buy luxury cars, property, and jewelry. This $250 million is the floor, Andy Lugar, the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, said. Our investigation continues. So in other words, at least $250 million they got, and maybe more, much more. Many of the companies that claimed to be serving food were sponsored by a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future, which submitted the company's claims for reimbursement. Feeding Our Future's founder and executive director, Amy Bach, was among those indicted, and authorities say she and others in her organization submitted the fraudulent claims for reimbursement and received kickbacks. Bach's attorney said the indictment does not indicate guilt or innocence. He said he would not comment further until he had finished reading the indictment. Interviews after law enforcement searched multiple sites in January, including Bach's home and offices. Bach denied stealing money and said she never saw evidence of fraud. Earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Justice made prosecuting pandemic-related fraud a priority. The department has already taken enforcement actions related to more than $8 billion in suspected pandemic fraud, including bringing charges in more than 1,000 criminal cases involving losses in excess of $1.1 billion. Federal officials repeatedly described the alleged fraud as brazen and decried that it involved a program intended to feed children who needed help during the pandemic. Michael Paul, special agent in charge of the Minneapolis FBI office, called it an astonishing display of deceit. Lugar said the government was billed for more than 125 million fake meals, with some defendants making up names for children by using an online random name generator. He displayed one form for reimbursement that claimed a site served exactly 2,500 meals each day, Monday through Friday, with no children ever getting sick or otherwise missing from the program. These children were simply invented, Lugar said. He continued that the government has so far recovered $50 million in money and property and expects to recover much, much more. Aileen Tichemedian of the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California Attorney General Rob Bonta took control from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department of a controversial criminal investigation into County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl and others, saying that sidelining the department was in the public interest. Bonta's unusual decision to strip the Sheriff's Department of its own investigation comes amid mounting questions about the department's handling of the probe and allegations from Kuehl and others that Sheriff Alex Villanueva is using it to attack political enemies. In another setback for the department, a Superior Court judge also yesterday, Tuesday, temporarily blocked sheriff's investigators from searching computers and other devices seized last week from Kuehl and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The actions bring an abrupt halt to the Sheriff's Department's efforts to investigate a series of contracts awarded by Metro to a domestic violence nonprofit. The investigation, which has been underway for more than a year, exploded back into public view last Wednesday when sheriff's deputies carried out early morning raids at the home of Kuehl and Patty Giggins, the head of the nonprofit, as well as Metro's headquarters and other county offices. Sheriff's investigators suspect that Kuehl, who is friends with Giggins, helped funnel the contracts to Giggins' nonprofit. According to court records, sheriff's investigators filed to obtain search warrants to carry out the raids. Bonta informed the Sheriff's Department that his office had assumed control of the investigation in a letter sent to Under Sheriff Tim Murakami. Your department should cease its investigative activity and refrain from any actions in furtherance of these investigations, including public statements or court filings related to the investigations, Bonta instructed. Andrea Salcedo and Marissa Iati of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. 5 years after the federal government bungled its response to catastrophic Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, the U.S. agency tasked with reacting to major disasters is under pressure again after this week's Hurricane Fiona battered the territory's infrastructure, flooded communities, and left the island without electricity. As the slow-moving storm headed north after a punishing push across the island, top officials at the Federal Emergency Management Agency issued repeated promises. This won't be like the last time. FEMA, they have insisted, is far better prepared for Fiona than it was in 2017 when Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico, plunging the island into one of the largest blackouts in U.S. history and claiming thousands of lives. In an after-action report, the agency admitted to systemic failures during the humanitarian crisis. By early Tuesday yesterday, the rain in Puerto Rico had eased as the storm began lashing Turks and Caicos and threatening Bermuda with winds that had increased in speed, making it a Category 3 hurricane. But even as Fiona moves on, it leaves a daunting path to recovery in Puerto Rico. Downpours will continue in some parts of the archipelago, aggravating already dire flooding and further complicating the response. Officials said at least 4 people have died there, but have warned that the toll could rise once emergency workers are able to assess the full scope of the damage. Residents still struggling to rebuild after Maria will be closely tracking the recovery process over the coming weeks and months. Many skeptical of the government's ability to help, with billions of dollars in promised federal relief funds still not dispersed half a decade later. On Sunday, President Biden issued an emergency disaster declaration, and Puerto Rico officials said they expected Biden to upgrade it to a major disaster declaration, which would unlock more federal resources for response and recovery. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Between Horniness and Holiness. That's how one of Leonard Cohen's friends summed up the writer and performer's life in the new biopic Leonard Cohen, A Journey, a Song. This one avoids most biopic formulas in that it's as much a story about the famous song, Hallelujah, as it is about the man who wrote it. Directors Daniel Geller and Dana Goldfein wisely stick to Cohen's professional life and the song's part in it, and away from, especially, the horniness aspect, which, given the number of relationships and kids that he had, could easily fill a 10-part streaming series. The episode about his affair with Janis Joplin would probably be killer. The holiness part is dealt with more thoroughly, as without knowing about his spiritual journey from the Orthodox Judaism he was born into in 1930s Montreal to being a trained Zen master, it would be hard to understand the song, the hymn, really, that Hallelujah in fact is. The reasoning behind the edits of the original lyrics of the song as it's appeared in various formats, like the Shrek movie, is explored in this one. A relatively well-known fact about the iconic 1984 Hallelujah track is that Cohen's label, Columbia, headed up then by Walter Yetnikoff, the same wizard who wouldn't release Springsteen's Nebraska until threatened with legal action, prevented the U.S. release of the album containing the song, Various Positions. It was released in the UK, which might have been where Welsh musician and Velvet Underground member John Cale first heard it before creating one of the song's most beloved covers a few years before the familiar Jeff Buckley version in the 90s. Leonard Cohen, A Journey, a Song, is a must-see for fans and an informative doc for any arts-curious moviegoer. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Have you ever found yourself stuck in what felt like a never-ending game of "stop copying me," in which one person keeps repeating what the other one says? You probably figured that the person parroting you was just trying to be annoying. But some critters might use vocal mimicry to save their skins. In a recent study, researchers found that certain bats buzz like bees, a sound that could discourage owls from eating them. The work appears in the journal Current Biology.
The idea dates back to over 2 decades ago.
Danilo Russo is a professor of ecology at the University of Naples, Federico II in Italy.
I was working for my PhD and I happened to capture Sangreta mouse-eared bats. When I took these bats out of the net, when I handled them, they invariably buzzed like wasps or hornets.
But what was the point of this unusual auditory outburst? Was it an involuntary squeak of distress? A warning cry to fellow roostmates? Or maybe, Russo wondered, was it a clever attempt to trick potential predators into thinking that they might want to back off if they don't want to wind up with a face full of bee stings?
Of course, the idea was attractive, but it was not very easy to test. And it took me a long time to design the right experiment.
The first thing the researchers did was compare the sounds made by mouse-eared bats with those made by hymenopterans, insects like bees and wasps.
So we recorded 4 species of stinging hymenopterans in the field, as well as these buzzing bats in hand. And then we tested statistically whether these different buzzes could be similar enough to fool a predator.
And they found that the sounds were fairly similar. You already know what hornets sound like. And the bats do a pretty good job of replicating that ominous hum. But even more interesting, when the researchers filtered the audio to include only the frequencies that can be heard by owls, the bat's main predator, the sound prints were even more alike.
Of course, this was just the first step, but then we had to see how an owl would react to this sound.
Working with an avian rescue center, Russo and his colleagues exposed 8 barn owls and 8 tawny owls to the buzzy output of both bees and bats, and they recorded the birds' reactions.
In all such cases, it was nice to see that the owls actually stepped back. So it increased the distance from the sound source, okay, which was identified as a potential danger.
So the birds backed away from the buzz. But what if owls just aren't fond of noise in general? To test that out, the researchers conducted a control experiment in which they broadcast some non-buzzy bat sounds.
In that case, the reaction of the owl was completely opposite, because the owl started to inspect the origin of the sound, probably because it was taken as a clue that potentially tasty prey item was there.
Interestingly, owls who were older when they were taken in by the rescue center were more perturbed by the cautionary buzzing than were birds that had been taken in as chicks.
This makes perfect sense, because adult animals that had experienced the danger posed by stinging hymenopterans in the field think twice before approaching a buzzing sound, while of course naive owls would not have this experience and could not rely on it.
The study was the first to find acoustic mimicry between a mammal and an insect. But based on the positive buzz, it probably won't be the last. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Are more books being banned, and which ones? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. According to a new report from the American Library Association, there has been, across the country, a marked escalation in the efforts to ban books. Some libraries have been threatened with loss of funding if they didn't remove certain titles. Some librarians have been accused of distributing graphic pornography, and police reports have been filed based on the books on the shelves. Most of the attacks focus on books with LGBTQ or black characters. Maya Kobe's memoir, Genderqueer, appears to be one of, if not the, most frequently targeted books in the country. The New York Times quotes the Library Association's director of the Office of Intellectual Freedom as saying, quote, "We're truly fearful that at some point we'll see a librarian arrested for providing constitutionally protected books on disfavored topics," which is a testament to this profoundly sad and highly dangerous state of affairs. Public libraries must be able to remain true to their mission. As President Dwight Eisenhower said, "The libraries of America are and must ever remain the home of free and inquiring minds. Everyone is entitled to the clear confidence that there they can freely seek the whole truth, unvarnished by fashion and uncompromised by expediency." Or as President John Kennedy put it, libraries should be open to all, except the censor. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day that labor activist Mother Jones led a march of miners' children through the streets of Charleston, West Virginia. Her aim was to illustrate the effects of poverty. In the speech she gave that day, Mother Jones declared, "Tyranny, robbery, and oppression of the people must go. The children must be educated." Her march took place during the 1912 to 1913 Paint Creek, Cabin Creek coal miners' strike in that state. During the strike, gunfire was exchanged between members of the United Mine Workers and the mine owners' hired private army. The governor declared martial law on 3 separate occasions. Mother Jones was arrested in February of 1913. She was accused of conspiring to commit murder and brought before a military court. She refused to recognize the legitimacy of her court-martial. Mother Jones was sentenced to 20 years in the state penitentiary. While she was under house arrest for 85 days, Mother Jones contracted a dangerous case of pneumonia. She was 76 years old. Her support of the miners and subsequent trial helped build the reputation of Mother Jones as a tough union activist and the miners' angel. It also helped lead the U.S. Senate to launch an investigation into conditions in the West Virginia coal mines. When Henry D. Hatfield was elected governor of West Virginia, he was determined to end the labor crisis. He released those who had been convicted under the military court. On May 8th, Mother Jones was set free. Mother Jones, the grandmother of all agitators, continued her fight for working people. Mother Jones's trial helped to spotlight the low wages coal miners earned, the long hours they worked, and the dangerous working conditions under which they toiled. One of her most remembered quotes is, "Pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living."
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs of only about 70 to 71. Cloudy with occasional showers this afternoon, and winds will be light and variable. Cloudy skies early tonight, followed by partial clearing, lows in the low 50s, and then partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs near 80 degrees, winds light and variable. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate right here in Rogue River itself. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is in the good range at 34 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.98 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that crowdsources from around the world. London is 68 degrees and fair. Paris is 67 and sunny. Rome is 77 and fair. Kyiv is 52 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 68 and clear. Hong Kong is 81 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 66 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 degrees with heavy rain showers. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is a pleasant 72 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that crowdsources from around the world. Peck of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Myanmar's military-ruled government denied reports it carried out an air attack on a school in the country's turbulent north-central region that killed at least 7 children, accusing the media of distorting the truth. Major General Za Min-tun, spokesperson for the ruling military council, acknowledged at a news conference in the capital that there had been fighting last Friday in the Tabayan Township in Saigang region. However, he blamed the government's armed opponents for the casualties, which, in addition to children sheltering at a school, included 6 adult villagers. Witnesses told the Associated Press and other media that 2 helicopters fired machine guns and heavier weapons at a school. In a Buddhist monastery in the village of Letyetkhon, attended by 240 students from kindergarten to grade 8 and taught by about 20 volunteer teachers. A school administrator said that after about an hour of continuous shooting, about 80 soldiers charged into the monastery grounds firing their weapons. The administrator, who used the pseudonym Myanmar so she would not be identified by the authorities, said about 30 children were wounded and 20 were taken away by soldiers along with 3 teachers. The number of children killed in the airstrike appeared to be the highest in a single day since the army seized power in a coup of February last year, ousting the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. The army's takeover triggered mass nonviolent protests nationwide, but when the military and police responded with deadly force, armed resistance arose in the cities and the countryside. Fighting has been especially fierce in Sagaing, where the military has launched several offensives, in some cases burning down villages and displacing more than 500,000 people.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Iran faced international criticism over the death of a woman held by its morality police, which ignited 3 days of protests, including clashes with security forces in the capital and other unrest that claimed at least 3 lives. The UN Human Rights Office called for an investigation. The United States, which is trying to revive the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran, called on the Islamic Republic to end its systemic persecution of women. Italy also condemned her death. Iranian officials dismissed the criticism as politically motivated and accused unnamed foreign countries of fomenting the unrest. Separately, an Iranian official said 3 people had been killed by unnamed armed groups in the Kurdish region of the country where the protests began, the first official confirmation of deaths linked to the unrest. The semi-official Fars news agency reported that around 300 protesters had gathered in downtown Tehran yesterday, Tuesday, chanting death to the dictator. AP reporters later saw a heavy deployment of police in the area, as well as torched trash bins and rocks strewn across some intersections. The governor of Tehran province accused foreign embassies of fanning the protests and said 3 foreign nationals had been arrested. He did not specify the nationality of the embassies or the detainees. The UN body said Iran's morality police have expanded their patrols in recent months, targeting women for not properly wearing the Islamic headscarf known as a hijab. It said verified videos show women being slapped in the face, struck with batons, and thrown into police vans for wearing the hijab too loosely. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.